everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we are back for another edition of Easter egg hunting and detail spotting. This time for the legend of Ruby Sunday. Let's get straight into them, shall we? Number 25. So right at the very start of the episode, the TARDIS flies toward Unit HQ and Kate Stewart tells her staff that it's time for Gold Protocols. Gold Protocol was first mentioned in The Giggle, and it appears to be something to do with giving the Doctor complete authority and acknowledging his position as President of the Earth, which he was first elected as when he was the 12th Doctor in Death in Heaven.
That's your answer for everything, isn't it? Vote for an idiot.
If you say so, Mr. President.
Number 24. So once the TARDIS does land in Unit HQ, our good old friend Colonel Ibrahim calls out Doctor on the Bridge as he salutes. Now, although it's not exclusive to Star Trek, Captain on the Bridge is something that is often announced when a captain is on the bridge of a starship, and it is most associated with Star Trek, which we know Russell T Davies is a fan of and has made reference to already in this season. Number 23, but while we're talking about Colonel Ibrahim, this is a character who might actually turn out to be more important than we initially thought, and unfortunately not in a good way. So in Sutek's first appearance in 1975's Pyramids of Mars, one of his acolytes who helps him return is also called Ibrahim. So maybe the Colonel isn't saluting the TARDIS, but is actually saluting his boss who's laying dormant perched on top of the TARDIS. Number 22. So once the Doctor arrives, he steps out of the TARDIS and greets Rose, and he asks Rose about her mum and uncle, which of course is a nod to Donna and the 14th Doctor. Now, in some of the pre-episode social media teasers, it was revealed that both Donna and Redacted, who we presume is 14, are actually away at Geneva, which then helps explain their absence in this episode. But can you imagine that phone call when Rose phones them to let her know what she's been up to and she just subtly drops, "Oh yeah, we fought Sutek today"? I would pay money to see 14's reaction to that. Number 21, another Star Trek reference here. So the Doctor is running through some of Susan Triad's different appearances, and one of them is the planet Slug as a slugma. It's that weird kind of half-space robot Skynet looking one. This is 100% a nod to the Borg in Star Trek. I mean, come on, that is totally a Borg. Number 20, so while everyone is looking at Susan Triad and talking about who she might be, there are a bunch of magazines on the screens behind Kate, and one of those is Space Magazine, which is a not-so-subtle play on the world-famous Time magazine, even down to the red font and the red border around the image. I mean, it speaks for itself, really. Space, time, Doctor Who, need I say more? Number 19. So sticking with this scene here, Kate describes Susan Triad as an evil genius with secret alien software. And then she says that UNIT has stopped plenty of those, except the obvious. A lot of people have speculated that this is very clearly a jab at the tech billionaire Elon Musk. Quite honestly, the less said about that whole situation, the better. So, number 18. The Doctor starts talking about Ruby and then flicks through loads of photos of Ruby on UNIT screens. Now, the middle photo here was clearly snapped during the filming of 73 Yards, because if you look at Millie Gibson and Michelle Greenidge's outfits, they are the exact same as what we saw them wearing in 73 Yards. And then a few moments later, they use a picture of them again in those very same outfits. They've just changed the colour and edited the background to make it look like they're totally different. But we see you, art department, we see what you did there. Number 17. So Harriet mentions that on the night that Ruby was abandoned as a baby, there was a CCTV camera positioned in a storage yard 66 metres away. 66 metres is just under 73 yards, which obviously is a very significant distance for Ruby, with the woman standing 73 yards away from her earlier in the season in the episode 73 Yards. The woman was a manifestation of Ruby's fear of abandonment, so it was actually really clever to put that CCTV camera the exact same distance away as well. Just like the woman, Ruby's mother, or this unknown figure, was always a distance away, and using that same figure just plays on that insecurity in Ruby's mind. She was semper distance away. Number 16. So while escorting Ruby home, Rose complains that UNIT doesn't have her doing any proper work and that they've got her investigating shoplifting in Catford. Catford is a London district and it was featured in Russell T Davies's 2018 novelisation of Rose, where it was one of the places that came under attack by the Autons. Obviously the Autons in the episode Rose were of course shop window mannequins that smashed through and escaped and then started attacking people. So this kind of shoplifting in Catford gag here feels like a reference to that situation, or a little acknowledgement of it. Number 15. So Susan Triad is telling Mel about her parents. And she says that her dad was a postman and her mum was a dinner lady. So it's time to pour ourselves back into the realm of the 10th Doctor and Rose had a kid theory. Because in Smith and Jones, the 10th Doctor jokingly says that he spent the last 15 years working as a postman. And if we take a trip back even further to school reunion, Rose is working as a dinner lady while they're investigating the school. Now, I'm not sure if this means anything or we're digging a little bit too deep here, but would anyone be surprised at this point if David Tennant was involved in this story somehow? Because I certainly wouldn't. Number 14. So Mrs. Flood says that it's nice for her to get out because she's always hiding herself away. Now earlier on in the episode, the Doctor used this exact wording to describe regeneration, telling Ruby that Time Lords can hide themselves away. This feels like a deliberate reuse of the same phrase. So could this be a big hint that Mrs. Flood is actually a Time Lord character and not just an acolyte for Sutekh?
Or sometimes we can hide ourselves away.
I'm always hiding myself away.
Also, does anyone else find it weird that the Doctor and Ruby have spent quite a lot of time together, even though we haven't really seen that, and he hasn't got to the point of explaining regeneration to her? Bit weird. They've been together quite a while. You'd think that would be quite high on the list of things to explain to her. Number 13. The Doctor is looking again at several magazines featuring Susan Triad. One of them is called Human Interest, and at the bottom of that magazine there's some text that reads, "The out-of-this-world plans for a settlement on Mars." This feels like another early hint at Sutekh's return, because in Pyramids of Mars, there's a pyramid on Mars that transmits the signal that keeps Sutekh imprisoned, and that is visited by the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith at the end of the story. So hints of a settlement on Mars. Number 12. The Doctor and the gang arrive at the time window, which first of all, another Star Trek little nod here because that massively resembles a holodeck. Also, kind of reminded me of that basic time machine that Rose and UNIT built in Turn Left for Donna. But anyway, this is not the first time that a time window has appeared in the Whoniverse. So if we think back to the girl in the fireplace, those clockwork droids created several time windows into the life of Madame de Pompadour on board the SS Madame de Pompadour in order to access various points in Renette's life. And then there were also time windows used in the Sarah Jane adventures in the story Lost in Time. So we have seen those before. Number 11. So when the time machine is switched on by the UNIT scientists, one of the dials on the control panel reads Artron. Now, Artron is a form of energy or radiation that exists within the time vortex, and it's featured a lot in Doctor Who over the decades. First, it was mentioned in the 4th Doctor serial, The Deadly Assassin, all the way back in 1976. Basically, whenever a script calls for a generic science-y energy thing, it's usually Artron. Artron energy, Artron signals, you get the picture.
So it pulls out the matrix, sticks it into a living receptacle, and then it feeds off the remaining Artron energy.
What's also very interesting, though, is that Clyde Langer actually used Artron energy to defeat the Trickster in the Sarah Jane Adventures episode The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith. So here we have yet another link to the Trickster. Coincidence? I think not. Number 10. So inside the time window, poor old Colonel Chidozi is turned into a dusty, decrepit corpse by Sutekh. And this is a direct visual callback to Pyramids of Mars. So in that story, Sutekh's acolyte Scarman dies in the exact same manner as Chidozi here. When Sutekh is done with him, no use for him anymore, he collapses to the floor and turns into a pile of bones and dust. Nice. Number 9, so later on we're back within the Unit HQ main room and there's a shot of the monitor on Kate's desk, and to the left-hand side of that monitor there is a picture of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. Not only is he Kate's father, but he was also one of the earliest members of Unit, so this was a lovely little touch to both honour the character but also the legacy of the late great Nicholas Courtney. Number 8. Now, we know that Russell T Davies does like to make blatant jabs at conservative politicians, and this episode has a couple. So firstly, Morris basically says that the Prime Minister is not allowed inside Unit. And then later on, Susan Triad does a little dance while walking onto the stage, and this is definitely mocking Theresa May, who did a similar dance at a party conference back in 2018. I mean, tell us how you really feel, Russell, because I didn't quite catch it in this episode. Number 7. So, speaking of Susan Triad, we hear an ominous, creepy voice take over her speech, and it says, "I think we can succeed."
And I think
we can succeed.
This voice is the fantastic Gabriel Wolfe, who voices Sutekh in this episode, but also voiced Sutekh way back in 1975 in Pyramids of Mars.
You will not die yet.
And if that voice sounded familiar to newer viewers, he also was the voice of the Beast in Series 2 two-part story, The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit.
Only the darkness remains.
He just has a very ominous voice. It's very foreboding. Number 6. So when everything starts kicking off, the Doctor tells Ruby to head back to the time window, and Kate says, "Sullivan, take her and run." Now, as revealed in the end credits, this is Corporal Alice Sullivan, a name that is surely a reference to the 4th Doctor companion and Unit Doctor Harry Sullivan. Unit does like to keep things in the family, doesn't it? Now, we've got Kate, we've got Rose, so it totally does make sense that this character of Sullivan is a descendant of Harry Sullivan, who also works for Unit. Number 5. So when Sutekh is starting to break through within Susan Triad, she starts to talk about all of her dreams of being these different characters. She also says that she dreams of worlds with orange skies. This should set your alarm bells ringing, because the world with orange skies that we are familiar with is Gallifrey. Now, if all of Susan Twist's other characters were real, does that mean that she was also a Gallifreyan character? Food for thought. Number 4. When Harriet is rattling off this list of all the other gods, she mentions Trickster, the god of traps, and Mara, the god of beasts. Now, we've been talking about the Trickster quite a lot lately. Of course, he was featured heavily in the Sarah Jane adventures as kind of the big bad. He meddled with time, generally was just not a very nice guy. As for the Mara, that's a much older Doctor Who villain. It was last seen in the 5th Doctor era back in the early 1980s. It can take many forms, but most often it resembled a giant snake, and it could appear in people's dreams and possess them. Again, that could very much link to Susan Triad, who keeps having bad dreams. Number 3. So Sutekh returns in all his space dog glory, which is a vastly different design of the character than what we saw in Pyramids of Mars. Now, if you look closely at the center of his forehead here, you can see that there's a ruby embedded within it. Ruby Sunday, Sutekh has a ruby in his head, you get the connection. Now, obviously, we've been speculating about what the link between Sutekh's return and Ruby's backstory might be. If this is anything to go by, perhaps these characters are more intertwined than we thought. Now, what is also very interesting is the Eye of Horus, which is the device that keeps Sutekh imprisoned in Pyramids of Mars, resembles a large red gem. So perhaps that indicates that Ruby will be part of the solution to get rid of Sutekh this time round. What's also worth noting, I mean, it's me, so of course I'm going to find a River Song connection somewhere, but Alex Kingston's novel, River Song Melody Malone novel, The Ruby's Curse, is all about searching for the Eye of Horus, which is described as a ruby. I don't know if there's a connection there, but it is interesting that we do seem to have all these links to the Eye of Horus being a ruby. There's a River Song connection in there somewhere. I'm just hoping beyond hope that we're going to get River back, okay? Let me keep my dreams. Number 2. During that big cliffhanger, Susan and Sutekh say that they're going to bring Sutekh's gift of death to the entire universe. Again, this is a direct callback to Pyramids of Mars, where Sutekh's acolyte refers to Sutekh's gift of death just after killing Ibrahim at the end of part 1. Number 1, while we're on the topic of Sutek, it would appear that the marketing team for season 1 has been teasing his involvement right under our noses. Many of the posters for season 1 featured this colourful, swirly background, which looks practically identical to the time-space tunnel that Sutek is trapped in Pyramids of Mars. Now, I'm not sure how much advanced knowledge the marketing team is given, but if this wasn't intentional, then it is one extraordinary coincidence, and we all know how the Doctor feels about coincidences. For more on Sutek in particular, then do check out our Ending Explained video, and we also have a spoiler discussion with myself and Sean discussing The Legend of Ruby Sunday. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.